quick sec. I'm following written instructions here. One moment, please.
Good job, Kevin.
We'll
Can you hear
see.
me? Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, Fred, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll mute myself now. All right.
Okay, meeting is now streaming live on custom live streaming services. You're good to go, Chairman.
All right, well, we have a quorum, so we might as well get going. Hopefully Commissioner Chapman can join us, or that could be her right there. I'll call this meeting to order of the Hood River Port Commission. It is 5:01 p.m. on October 6th. Do we have any modifications or additions to the agenda from any commissioners?
Acting President Shepherd, we have one consent item B. You will see it when we on the screen if you'd like, but it's a change to the change order number 2. It's a slight increase in scope and a slight increase in cost. The new cost or amount should be $3,016. And that's it from staff.
And are there any commissioners?
None from Commissioner Strike.
Okay. Move on to public comment. Michael, do you have anyone?
No one's here.
And did we receive any written comment that we need to address?
None.
Okay. Then we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there no questions regarding that? Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Ben, are you asking for a second?
Yes, please, Hubby.
One thing, David, do you want your motion to be made with the changes on B?
Yes. With the changes
Okay,
on
so
the
noted.
cost and
I'll
scope.
second that motion then.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Commissioner Strike, aye.
Merriweather, aye.
And Shepherd is an aye as well. We don't have any informational reports this evening, so that'll move us immediately into presentations and discussion items. And the first one would be a bridge replacement project update. Kevin? Who is currently on mute.
There we go. Let me start this guy up here. Give me just a quick sec.
Kevin, I believe Commissioner Chapman is trying to join the meeting. Is that something you can allow?
Absolutely. Let's see here. Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Sorry, Christy.
That's okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Let me go to the beginning here. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity just to give a summary. I'll try to keep this under 10 minutes and available for any questions at the end. But wanted to give you a summary on the BUILD grant, some statistics on the program, talk about some of the eligible costs and resources, some key timeline milestones, and talk about which tasks will be worked on in the next fiscal year. So first of all, BUILD has been around for 3 years. It's the Better Utilizing Investment to Leverage Development. They work really hard to get these acronyms figured out. It used to be known by as TIGER back from 2009 to 2017. And these are discretionary funds awarded by the Secretary of Transportation. This year, there was $1 billion that was awarded for surface transportation projects. These are mainly construction projects, but this was actually the first year that they actually allowed for planning grants, and that's what we actually were successful with. It is important to realize that the use of these funds will trigger the Title 23 rules on the new bridge. So by accepting the grant application, the assumption is that all of the tolls for the replacement bridge will be going back into that replacement bridge. And it does not affect the tolls on the current bridge. Just touching on the use of the match, the port will likely use cash reserves from the February 2018 toll increase. And if you recall, this was a joint application with Klickitat County. And as such, we were required to state very specifically what Klickitat County's contribution to the application, the program would be. And so this is relatively low hanging fruit, but they agreed to chair the AE, the engineering and design selection process, which is really the same process that we went through to select WSP as the EIS consultant. There was a small selection team made up of Port of Klickitat, the Port of Hood River, and DOT reps. So all this is saying is that Gordy, who's the Klickitat County Public Works Director, he will be the chair of that process. He will not be facilitating the process. We will likely have a separate RFP agreement with OTAC, not unlike what we had with the Southwest Washington RTC to develop the RFP for that process. And then the other task that Klickitat County agreed to was to also chair the Technical Advisory Committee during the engineering process. And again, that TAC is just simply made up of local public works, operational professionals, and serve to make comment to the engineering team at key points. Grant agreements must be signed and obligated by September of 2022, so we got plenty of time. And likewise, the project must be completed and all the funds spent by September of 26. We will be following, as far as the public contracting rules, federal rules. This will be run through Federal Highways Oregon Division. And this is a reimbursement program, which I believe the port is quite familiar with, not unlike the House Bill 2017 reimbursement program, where the port will pay the entire invoice up front, submit the paid invoice to the feds, and then be reimbursed at an 80% rate. So that's kind of a summary on the program itself. And these are just some stats. I'll just blow through these. There was in the lower right-hand corner, there was 70 awards out of 655 applications. That's about a 10%, little greater. And then you can see those planning grant applications. There were 7 awarded out of 55 applications. There were only 3 applications from ports in Oregon. The Port of Cascade Locks and the Port of Garibaldi also submitted applications. And there were a total of 13 applications from Oregon, and Hood River was the only successful application. Of the 70 awards, 2 projects were bi-state projects. So we were one of 2 bi-state joint projects awarded this year. So moving on to the eligible costs. This is actually pulled directly out of the grant application, which is available on our website. I didn't include that in your packet. Figured you didn't need to see all 30 pages. But the costs that are identified in the project are project management costs, legal costs, contracted project management expenses. Those would be similar to like Steve Siegel's work. We could also governance evaluation, so Siegel's work separate from the project management and some of the financial evaluations. We will be able to cover some of his governance work as well. And then we've got a pretty significant amount for traffic and toll revenue surveys. And then the real meat of the grant is to actually get some significant design accomplished, which we were not able to do as part of the NEPA process. And so we've got a 15% engineering design, which will get a significant amount of phase 1 and some phase 2 work complete, and of course the geotechnical borings. And then we have a $500,000 contingency for any unforeseen costs. And then as far as the resources, it was pretty easy. It's the $5 million from the program, and then the 1.25 from the Port of Hood River. We are currently in the process of evaluating with the state of Oregon about being able to use yet to be used House Bill 2017 money as a potential match, so that we potentially could put in less than that 1.25 if the state of Oregon allows some of that House bill money to be moved over to that. Clearly, we want to get as much money as possible so we can get as much work done. So there is a drawback to that as well. This next slide is a summary of the future actions and some of the key milestones. The bold items are contracts or amendments that I anticipate bringing to the commission in the coming months. My plan is during fall planning is to dive a little bit deeper into some of these contracts and allow a pretty full conversation about what each one of these contracts, what we're expecting to get out of them. But they are going to be coming up relatively shortly, some of them before the end of the year. The governance contract with Steve Siegel that you see there. Well, I'll break down some of these a little bit later, but I anticipate that we can get most of this work done by 2023. So before I get into breaking down the task, part of it is, what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish after NEPA and with this next pre-construction phase. The first one we've already accomplished, and that's established the formal interim work group. There's been an MOU that's been worked by the Bi-State Working Group, and will be making the rounds in Klickitat and Hood River County. And I think that's been a real wonderful process that Steve Siegel has helped the group through. The other element that's I think an important goal is the preparation of legislation for the Bi-State Bridge Authority, which was identified as the preferred method for future ownership and management of the replacement bridge. Another goal is also advocating for continued state and federal funding and for any policy adjustments needed to create the Bridge Authority. And then be in a situation where the project can begin the U.S. Department of Transportation TIFIA loan process. So here is the post-NEPA work that's broken down into 3 separate phases. You'll probably see, right now we've got phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. We will likely be parsing out part of reducing this down to 2 post-NEPA phases just for simplicity, but I think this does kind of show you approximately what the next phases will be. And there will be some costs throughout all of those phases as well. And then I'd like to just the next slides will show how the current funding will be split amongst those individual work tasks. So from House Bill 2017, the work from that bill was primarily to complete the final EIS and record of decision. However, the agreement between ODOT and the Port of Hood River does allow for other tasks to be accomplished that furthers the bridge replacement effort. And some of that post-NEPA work has already been funded by House Bill 2017. As an example, the $75,000 governance contract with Steve Siegel, which was is just in the process of being completed. That was funded from House Bill 2017 funds. And that wasn't pulled out of the contingency. That was just a non-NEPA expense that was approved through the budget process. We will also be able to accomplish the RFP bid selection process to select the engineering team. There's also this $450,000 budget would also allow for the 2021 governance work, which would be the actual creation of the legislation that Steve Siegel would be doing to develop the legislation for Salem and Olympia to actually create the bridge authority. That would include public information processes and detailed work with the bi-state working group starting next spring. There would be opportunities for continued P3 education and information. We'd be able to look at start the process for financial ratings and continued toll policy evaluations. Now this $450,000 budget from House Bill 2017 also assumes that the contingency that has been there in the past, which was about anywhere between $250,000 and $300,000, that $450,000 budget includes the unspent contingency. So that's assuming that as we move through, there aren't any surprises. If for some reason we do need to get into some of that contingency for NEPA work, well, some of these items would be pushed into the build tranche. So here we are with the build budget. And again, the two big ones there are the geotechnical evaluation and the 15% design. And there's work available also for governance work, which would be actually in after the legislation was formed. And that would actually entail preparing for how that authority would actually be up and running. And then ongoing traffic and revenue work. And so that's the money that we have, but what's next? I mean, kind of looking forward, if we are fortunate enough to get additional funds from either Salem or Olympia, we do plan on making requests to both states in the 21 session. But nothing is known at this point. But if we were so fortunate to be awarded additional appropriations, we could get up to that 30% design complete, which is a really significant milestone. Continuing the governance work, beginning the hard work for getting the financial ratings, some right-of-way acquisition, and really starting the TIFIA loan application process. So that's kind of a preview of what the next items wouldn't be needed to complete the post-construction work. With that, I do plan on diving into some of these contracts and kind of a longer term breakdown on the legislative strategy and how that lines up with the work that I've shown you tonight, plus work to be done in order to get to the construction phase. But I'd certainly be interested in hearing any questions or concerns or comments and from the commission.
Kevin, Commissioner Strike. Hey, Kevin, I have a question in regard to Title 23. This will be the first phase we do decide to go with this $5 million grant. It'll affect Title 23. What does that do for the appeal for the P3 prospective client? Is the Title 23 only associated with the $5 million, or once they go into the Title 23, it's for the whole project?
Yeah, I think once you trigger 23, the expectation is that 100% of the tolls would go back into that bridge.
So with that being said, in your professional opinion, what does that do to the potential entrepreneur client for the P3 investor?
That's a good question. I'm not going to flounder about and try to give you an answer that I don't feel 100% confident with. So let me do a little bit of digging on that and
Okay.
bring that to you. Bring a better answer to you on that for fall planning.
Okay,
Let me-
great. Thanks,
maybe I
Kev.
Maybe I could jump in on that. So Title 23 defines what the revenue from a bridge can be used for. And so it's very specific, but it also includes the provision that it can be used for a reasonable rate of return. TIFIA loans are used frequently on P3 projects, and they're used by definition for a return on the investor that's reasonable in the context of a P3 project. So it doesn't preclude at all the involvement of a private partner in that sort of approach.
Thank
Any more
you.
questions for Kevin?
I have one if I could. First of all, this is quite a coup to receive these build funds. Congratulations, Kevin and staff. This is outstanding to be able to secure these funds. Obviously, there weren't very many that were able to pull this off. I do have a question with regard to the record of decision that we have on the environmental impact statement. We're not out of that woods yet. Essentially, we still have a way to go before we hopefully get that record of decision. If there are delays or complications with that as we go forward, do you see that impacting the build program and I guess complicating the work that we can do there based on any problems that we may have getting a final EIS record decision?
Yeah, I think that the potential is there for sure. I don't anticipate it, but I can give you an example of the type of comment that might delay it. One example would be the location of the piers. So, for example, the tribal fishing access site on the Washington side actually has an underwater legal parcel extending out into the river. I believe 2 piers as part of the preferred alternative land within that underwater parcel of BIA. So if for some reason, since geotechnical work we're kind of chomping at the bit to want to do some borings, if for some reason those piers needed to be moved around, there would need to be some adjustment to the core permit to find better locations for those piers, to update the permit and to otherwise update the final EIS. That's an example. I don't know if that's going to happen. WSP and your team has identified that as a potential risk, and we've certainly talked to BIA and the tribes as we do our consultation about this issue, but nobody has stated anything in explicit opposition.
Have we had much in the way of responses, essentially at all, with regard to some of those inquiries that we're making to the tribe, in particular in BIA? I mean, are they responding or just not getting much information?
No. I think Federal Highways has been pretty impressed with our ability to persevere and kind of push on the tribal consultation. I believe I reported a couple months ago that we met with the CRITFIC operations manager who actually runs on-the-ground operations for that treaty fishing access site. And one of the things that he shared with us that we will include in the final EIS and our outreach log, is that he identified that perhaps the bike ped path being on the west side of the bridge might be problematic to the fishers, the tribal fishers on the site. There's also been another item that we got from Mr. Broncho at that July meeting, was that the current piers are used from time to time by fishers to hook or otherwise affix their nets. And so, there could be a solution or a suggestion to somehow make the pier, design the new piers in such a way that would help facilitate fishers. Again, none of these have been vetted. None of them have been discussed with the Coast Guard or otherwise vetted, but we are getting really good comments from the tribes. Whether they're going to be significant enough to show up in that public comment period is yet to be known. But we're prepared to jump on those solutions if they do show up.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And
Yeah.
I look forward to diving a little bit deeper on these issues in fall planning.
I just echo what Commissioner Merriweather said. Anybody involved in that, great job. All right, we're going to move on to Lower Mill conceptual design discussion. Hi, Ann.
I guess Ann, am I going to hand that to you, or do you want me to do that one?
I can do it. That'll be fine, then I can click through it.
Gotcha. Now let's see. Now, how do I, do you know how I
I
should?
think I can just do it. Can you guys see that?
Oh, perfect.
Building plans? Okay, well, we're muddling through, Kevin, good job.
Takes a team.
Okay, so Livermore Architects was contracted by the port back in March to put together 10% preliminary building designs for 2 lots at the Lower Mill. So over the past number of months, we've been working through different iterations of those very preliminary plans. And what you see before you is the final iteration. They provided port staff with 2 different options for each lot. And what you see here is really a very efficient and straightforward group of designs that allows for truck access and all the things you need for an industrial building. So we also had some input from Chris Nelson, who's very experienced with this type of development. And he gave us some input that made these designs even more efficient. So what you're looking at here with the plans, I'll just kind of, make it a little bit bigger here so you can see. So these are the 2 lots that that we decided to move forward with the board. And this top lot up here, because of this access, we had to flip-flop where we thought the building would need to be so we could get truck access. There isn't room on the site for a loading dock for large semi-trucks. So you've got these small loading bays for box trucks and smaller truck access. So 25,100 square feet. And that's a pretty straightforward building right there that fits on that sort of awkwardly shaped lot. Plenty of parking and ability to get around. This secondary building, that's the larger of the 2, 32,400 square feet, is really, again, just able to host large semi-trucks. So you've got kind of a shared loading bay at the bottom of the screen there that will be shared between all the tenants, and a walkway that you can see where they could unload and then have pallet jacks or whatever they've got bring things to their spaces. So floor plans dock high loading docks. You can see the movement, how things would move around, and just really pretty simple, easily demisable spaces. Very basic. Again, remember this is a 10% design drawing, so we've got pretty basic elevations here, but it just gives you idea of how this might look should the port want to move forward. And then this is the second smaller building, which could be demised into smaller areas, but a maximum probably of 5 tenants. So everybody's got access to those bays. And that's it for the design. As far as any questions on that before we move into the cost estimates? No? Okay, Kevin, I'll give it back to you to go back to the packet. So the design, as part of our contract with Livermore, a third-party estimating company was hired to give us, again, a 10% cost estimate. And as you notice from the summary there, it's shockingly high. So we're looking at over $300 a foot when you include some of the site work. So in talks with the estimator, this is very, very conservative based on the current market and also where we're at with design. So there's a sizable contingency in there, and contingencies in all line items. We could shrink it pretty easily by at least 5%. But right now, this is where the estimator was comfortable. We did have a discussion about the current bidding market and the fact that bids are coming in significantly less than estimated just because of the current economic situation that we're facing now. So they're seeing recent bids coming in, 20 to 30% lower than anticipated. So that's something to consider moving forward. You'll see at the bottom, this was initially costed and designed as concrete tilt-up. And then there's pre-manufactured steel structure deducts at the bottom. That's not a prefab building, that's just steel structural components and some other metal components versus the concrete tilt-up structure. So that's all I have as an update for you. You'll likely see this again at fall planning as part of the development analysis for potential development options for the commission to consider.
And I'm glad you mentioned the cost estimate being high because it's ridiculously high, and no one that's serious would ever spend $300 a square foot on a warehouse unless they simply didn't care how much it cost. So is there some reason that they decided to plan this conservatively? Because it really doesn't give us any information on the cost side, because we would never do that.
We do have some comparables that were built within the last year that are within this range, that are over $300 a foot for warehouse buildings.
That seems very irresponsible. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Commissioner Strike, what we use for comps for Odell area at 85 cents a square foot? What were those comps?
Those are within the neighborhood of the Lower Mill. So you've got a new building that's right next door that was 85 cents a foot for some of their lease spaces, those recent leases within the last year.
And do we have any pending potential clients asking for this type of structure in the Odell area?
Yeah, a couple. There's still, the market's still very, very tight. So, we still have a number of small businesses, anywhere from 2,500 to 10,000 square feet. There are a couple of businesses locally who are still looking for that type of space, just because it's not available. There are a couple of vacancies right now, though, too, that are in the 3,800 square foot range. Most of those are still vacant because they don't have things like floor drains and are not ready for value-added food production businesses, which is really what I'm seeing the most need for.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
And where is the warehouse that you said that was recently built at over $300 a square foot? I'd like to.
I'll have to
See that.
look, I'll have to look in what our architect sent us last week. I can't remember. I believe it was the Portland area.
Because I don't understand how a light industrial, unless it's, you know, unless it was designed as like a brewery where they wanted the high end finishes and they wanted the, you know, they're maximizing the site. I can't see that
It was
at price.
It was a concrete tilt-up building. I can send you the comps that were sent to me if that's helpful.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ann? All right, thank you. All right, moves us along to our executive director's report. Michael. I'm sorry, Michael, I can't hear you. Is your computer muted at the moment?
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Thank you.
So I just want to hit a few items. The biggest one is the draft agendas in the packet. This is for fall planning. Fall planning is a time to hit a few topics in depth. These are the ones that seem the most important right now from a strategic standpoint. The strategic plan, bridge replacement, the real estate strategy is real important. Perhaps less important but meaningful would be Ordinance 24 discussion. We had some real challenges with enforcement on the waterfront this past summer. We often do. And then having a discussion about the airport noise abatement options, the work of the noise committee. So the intent here is that the next meeting to have a pretty dialed in specific but still draft agenda that the commission would then approve, and then we would utilize that at our meeting in November. So I would appreciate any input on this draft and additional items or items that you see here that aren't so important. I believe it is very important to utilize this meeting for some strategic business plan restart discussion and the real estate strategy. Those to me are the most important, but the others are also meaningful. In terms of the time or the date for the meeting, we try to do this in November. So one option is to combine it with one of the standing meetings. That means often a really long day. We typically start at noon for strategic plan. So therefore, we could go on the 3rd, but that's an election day. We could go on the 17th. That's later in the month. So I would recommend that we go November 10th, which is would mean 3 meetings in 3 consecutive weeks, but it would allow us to just focus only on the strategic items for the fall planning session. So there I am asking for feedback from the commission and direction.
This is Commissioner Chapman. I'd vote for the 10th.
I concur. I'm fine with that. I'll go either way though. The 10th or the 17th is fine with me.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm fine on the 10th as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Strike is 10th. Michael, do we think do we need the 17th at all? We'll have 2 meetings that month. It's November.
Maybe not, but I think we want to make sure we get the lease rates for the marina and the airport done and approved.
Okay.
So if so, I think we could make it a very short meeting. So this would be starting at noon. The last question is, are any commissioners comfortable assembling in the commission room if we're all spaced out, or do you feel comfortable with the Zoom format?
I'm going to stay with Zoom for the foreseeable future. I'll start that one off.
Okay, that pretty much answers it. That's fine. I just wanted to see if there was any reason to try to make this one an in-person. Okay, thank you. So please give me any feedback in any text or email, or call me, and we'll work the draft agenda into a final format. Just a new highlighted staff item, but Louis Ambers, who's been our lead man for several years now, is retiring December 31st, moving to Montana, a long time dream of his. So we're losing someone who's very valuable and experienced, but there's an opportunity to then move some folks up. Port of Klickitat executive director is left the Port of Klickitat, so there's a recruitment underway for that position. Under development, it appears that there's tentative approval from Pacific Power for the grant application that was submitted by the Marla through the Energy Trust. This is for a charging station by the port building and an assessment of our fleet in terms of fuel consumption and potential alternatives with different vehicles in the future. Also under development, I mentioned this stormline issue related to the Halyard building. That apparently has been resolved so that the mainline portion, the portion of the main line that the service line from the Halyard building accesses will apparently remain in place until probably phase 4 of that project. So I think that's been resolved. On the airport, both the Connect 6 and the North Ramp are substantially complete. I want to call out Ann for some excellent work up there and managing those two projects. A lot of work, a lot of setup, probably a year and a half of setup with the permitting, and then great work in implementing that. We had a good contractor and excellent work by Ann. And finally, as you know, we canceled the bridge inspection, or the inspections of the lift span that required high lifts. And we did get SBE out here to do some mechanical inspections that didn't require the lifts. And the decision was made yesterday to postpone the more extensive non-destructive testing of the trunnions, which require multiple high lifts over several days, but we'll postpone that until springtime and try to find a weather window. But there is electrical inspection to do, and there is the installation of this remote communication link and equipment for the lift span. And that work we would like to get done this fall. They will try to plan that, schedule that work for in the next couple of weeks. And optimally, it would require 2 high lifts to make sure that the communications link are operational and working satisfactorily. They can do it without any lifts, but there's less, it's more uncertainty, I guess you'd say, that the communication links are operational. So I'll stay in touch with Mount Adams Fruit and make sure that if we want to do the testing, the lifts, that we'll make sure they're comfortable with it and time it for their operations. So there's a lot more items in the report, but those are the highlights.
Just so the other commissioners know, a lot of that pushback to Michael came from me on those lifts because I get a lot of phone calls from the fruit industry. So I just wanted to thank you for being so flexible on this. That is very much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. And the airport advisory committee minutes are in your packet as well. Some other information. That's my report.
Michael, I had one quick question on the electric charging station. I mean, I think it's great that the port's considering getting an e-vehicle. Do we need to implement a charging? I'm not exactly sure why we would need to even implement a charging station if it's for port vehicles only. You know, they would only need to be charged overnight, and they could be parked, you know, back in the yard area that you know, the public doesn't have access to. So I'm just curious why we're looking at a charging station, unless you want it to be available to the general public as well.
My understanding is the application would have a charging station available to the public too. So it's not just for port. We don't have an electric vehicle. It may be that Kevin is the only one that drives one. But no.
I drive one too.
Hey, there you go. So yeah, it would be for the public or for port staff use.
Yeah, I think that the grant would look at not only the port's potential for electric vehicle use, but also for the city and county of Hood River to see. I mean, it's over $100,000, the total of the grant, but then it would provide a charging station at the port. Obviously, it would indicate whether or not it made sense, and that'd be from consultation with staff and others for the port to try to branch out into electric vehicles among the fleet, but it would be available for the public of the port, assuming the port move forward with electric vehicles.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Michael, I have another question. The storm drain work that the city is doing, did the state release the Christmas tree money that was pledged in the last session for this? Remember, it was sort of everything was held up when the COVID crisis hit and they were redirecting funds through the e-board. Did the city get the money for this, or
No,
they doing it on their own, or what?
the state did not issue lottery revenue bonds for any of those projects.
Okay. So has there been any further discussion about with the city about the port's participation in that, or what is the status of all that conversation that we had a year or so ago?
We have not had any. I'm reaching out to Will Norris to try to restart that. I don't have an idea, frankly, right now of what the financing plan is. I believe, based on the signs that are up, that the city did receive a loan grant combination for phase one, and I don't know whether any tax increment funds were pledged as part of that or not. I suspect not many, especially if you're on the URA board and haven't heard about that.
No, I haven't. But have you, Hobie? Okay. Yeah, it has not come before the Urban Renewal Board.
Right, it has not, yeah. Thanks, David.
I'll find out what I can from the city and I'll report back at the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. We have a couple commissioner committee reports this evening. Commissioner Strike, do you have any comments on the Airport Advisory Committee?
No, I was not attending. Ann will take if you have any questions.
There was just
Anyone have a
one-
question for Ann? Or?
Well, I just had one item that I wanted to call to your attention. The committee had an actual recommendation to the commission, and that was that the anemometer, which is the wind speed device that checks the wind speed, is currently in a location and has been for quite some time that does not give accurate wind data. And so our engineers were there, and there was a good discussion and realization that we can move just the anemometer from the AWAS. We don't have to move the entire AWAS. And that project is something that could be potentially FAA eligible. And so the AAC would like the commission to put that on our annual CIP list with the FAA. And so there's no action needed tonight, but that was a recommendation that they had.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No, not at all.
All right, then we will move on to tolling committee. Commissioner Everett's not here this evening. Michael, are there any comments on that, or should I just move along?
Well, I would just point out that we had the first tolling committee meeting. It's the new committee you created, and it really is constituted by Fred and Commissioner Everett and myself. So I think with further discussion, you can read what John wanted to make sure each of the commissioners, what he felt, and each commissioner would know about it. So he's not here. It's pretty self-evident what his what his opinion is.
Yep, thank you. All right, we have several action items, so we will get started with action item A on P Square, and that would be Fred.
So hopefully this will be, we won't be having too many more of these. We're coming to the end of our tolling system as we see it today. And the last piece of this is the credit card and interfacing the credit card machine terminals within the tolling network. So we get behind the firewall and then we interface it with the vehicles as they transfer through the lanes 2 and 3. And so this is the one piece remaining for our tolling system to interface the payment system to the lanes. And it's a large amount, but it's the last piece that we have. And then the reporting, what we're trying to do here with this reporting of 8,000 is trying to create the module to where we as users can write the different type of reports, so we don't have to constantly go back to P Square and ask them, hey, we want to look at a report differently, or we want different sets of data. This allows us to create the module to where we just pull the data based on a certain time frame. This is something that users can do. So we won't have to continue to ask them for reports and getting billed for it. So
Fred, Commissioner Strike, last meeting I asked you what the average time per transactions, and you said 2 or 3 seconds. That really wasn't my question. My question was, what's the average time of the transaction, as far as by the time the customer hands a card to the attendant and the gates come up? Is it 20 seconds?
it depends on the type of card, the qualified versus non-qualified, but to answer your question directly, it's sitting right around the 6 to 7 seconds for a qualified card. Does that help you? From the time I reach over and the clock starts, I give you my credit card and they swipe it and it goes through. Yeah, it takes about that long.
And Fred, what is the capabilities of this new P Square device? Is it PayPal acceptable, Apple, Google Wallet, Venmo? Can they all be used? And also, is it credit card and debit card, or just credit card?
I'll answer the latter part. It is both debit and credit. And as far as Apple, whatever your credit card is tied to, it will take.
Okay. Thank you.
Fred,
But on what Hobie was saying, is it something that a user can use their phone, and just, how the Apple Pay, you just set your phone over the surface and it pays?
Yeah, we don't have that.
Right, that was my question, Christy.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of terminal. It's a credit card terminal, so we don't have that piece of hardware.
So it has to be a physical card. Are we looking at the ability to being able to do a non-physical card with people now having Apple Pay on their watches and Google Pay and Venmo and all those different other?
Yeah, we can look at
pay?
we can look at that. The terminal part of things is a hardware piece, and it's usually the most inexpensive piece. But we looked at just the terminal that we have, the terminals up there that we have. We can look at some other options with regard to the new technology that's coming out with, how people use their smartphones and stuff like that. But
Everybody's kind of taking my question here too. I worry about spending this kind of money and what kind of time it will take to recoup it when it's the oldest, well, other than a slide, it's the oldest way to run a credit card, and not a way I think we're going to be doing it for very long at all.
So just to give you an idea, this is the programming. The hardware is like, I don't know, the terminal is like $400 or $350. So getting another type of unit that can scan like an iPhone would be also very minimal. So that's not what this is about. This is getting the transaction behind the firewall so it can get secured, and tying it to the actual vehicle as it comes up.
So updating to a method of payment, be it a scan, a physical card, or whatever, is a minor, or would be a minor addition or a minor
Yeah, that's
change
not
to
the big, yeah, that's not a big issue. We can just
Okay.
start experimenting at that point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because I just went to an RFI terminal where they just hold the card next to it. A
Mhm.
lot faster, less chance of breaking a card, the chip not reading. It's a lot more
Right.
faster.
No, terminals are very.
Fred, also in regard to the nightly download, does that go to your terminal or is that at the terminal in the booth?
The nightly, you mean the
Nightly
payment,
download?
the payments get secured within the way this will allow the payment to get secured within the network behind the firewalls, and then that gets transmitted through the secured PCI compliant firewalls, I think every hour.
Okay, but don't you get a daily readout of actual capital spent? And does that come to
Actual
your
credit card,
terminal or
yes,
come
we
to the
can do
terminal
that,
booth?
yes, absolutely.
But does it come to the booth terminal or does it come to your terminal on your desk? Because we
I
don't
have
want
access to the
Staff
report.
to have access to that.
Yeah, I have access at my desktop. The booth, basically that just hits the lane controllers and then that gets passed through to the server.
Okay, thank you.
Fred, the system, does it involve an interaction with the toll taker, with the employee taking the card and putting it in the machine and that sort of thing? And is that something else that can be modified down the road relatively easily if it's just someone being able to use their card or their app without having to interact with a toll taker?
So yeah, two different things. So that you're talking, I think most of this discussion is about the payment side of things. And so, yeah, we could look at that. That's the cheaper, that's a very inexpensive side of things versus, and the answer is yes, we can. The programming here is tying it to the vehicle and the classification, what's coming up. So the toll collector, so we can see whether or not you have an 18-wheeler and
Right.
18-wheeler payment, you know, for that vehicle that came up and tying that together.
Okay, so it will involve the toll taker having to interact and then determine what the charge should be and that sort of thing.
At this point, but I think when I'm hearing you all talk about is, can we put maybe, you know, start looking at as we progress with technology, the type of terminal that people can have their iPhone and just place it on the terminal as they walk by, and so the interaction with the toll collector becomes less.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, any more questions for Fred? Then I would entertain a motion on the action item.
I'll move to approve task order 6 with P Square not to exceed 50,000 for payment card interface and reporting enhancements to our tolling system subject to legal counsel review.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Strike will second that.
All in favor?
Commissioner
Chapman,
Strike,
aye.
yes, aye.
I believe I heard 3 ayes. Chair is also an aye. Motion passes. Action item B, authorized purchase agreement with Marina Controllers. Daryl.
Hi, everyone. Okay, we've talked about this a whole bunch for a long time, and Fred and I have found this program we think is great, and I think will do what it needs to do, and I'm hoping that you'll approve that. Anybody have any questions?
I would like to just add that the reason why we're getting off of our Marina system is because we really don't have any support. There's only one person in the whole country that we can call to get support. So it's just not a good platform to move forward on.
Thank you. Any questions for Daryl? Then can I have a motion, please?
I move we authorize a purchase agreement with MIDI Mainframe Associates for purchase of Marina Controller software not to exceed $11,879.
Is there a second?
A second.
Commissioner Sprackle, second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Chapman, aye.
Strike aye.
Meriwether, aye.
And Shepherd is an aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you, Daryl.
Oh, thank you guys. I'm so excited.
We'll be right back to you after we hear about an amendment number 2 to the contract with Kaufman Engineering from Michael.
So if you recall, Kaufman is essentially serving as a peer review engineer for the two projects that have the most significant potential liability and costs to the port. The one you've already heard from them in terms of the pier condition at the mud line. The second one, which could be even harder, especially to implement, would be the approach ramps. So you heard from WSP, who did testing of the sodium chloride content of the concrete and determined that it's below, in many places, it's below the rebar depth. And so having a second set of eyes on this and having recommendations from someone who, with Harvey Kaufman's experience as staff believes is important, to make sure that we know what the right approach is to address this and know what we're facing roughly in terms of cost. The task 3 is one that I am asking for a request or approval for, which is an equally important matter, which is to really, as we do every year, look hard at our 30-year capital model and try to make sure we're anticipating projects and costs and how we're going to pay for them on the bridge for the next 3 decades. It's more important, as I point out in the memo now, because we're trying to balance investing in the bridge, making sure it's safe and operational, with the need to monitor the bridge replacement efforts and tamp down any spending if it looks like we are getting traction on bridge replacement. So this amendment would add that task to Kaufman's work, which is to look in on the model we have with the inputs that we've received on the piers and on the approach ramps and other matters like the lift span, make sure we're covering all the bases. The other thing I'd add here, though, is that we may be in a transition point here from the bridge engineer we've had for a long time to someone new. And in some ways, I think John and I both really appreciate the depth of experience with Harvey Kaufman. And we want to make sure that going forward, we have the bridge engineer that's the best fit and the most experience for a 90-year-old movable lift span bridge. So based on Harvey's work, I think we'll need to make a determination the next year, by next budget year, whether we continue on with the current engineer or whether we shift to this one. So asking for your approval here to make sure we're staying on top of these high priority bridge matters.
Thank you. Any questions for Michael? Then would anyone like to make a motion?
I would move we authorize amendment number 1 to the contract with Kaufman Engineering for approach ramp and capital plan review not to exceed $50,533.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please?
Meriwether is aye.
Strike aye.
Chapman, aye.
And Shepherd is aye. Motion passes. Thanks, Michael. Action item D is to authorize an application for a core grant. And
So the core grant is something that's been made available by the state for the last few years. This is the next round. This would be for avgas fuel only. if you remember, the current location where the fuel tank is not in conformance with FAA standards and is a temporary location. So if the port was successful in receiving this grant, the total cost with the pump system, which I received a quote for today, the total cost of this project would be $180,000. If we got the core grant, then the port's match would be $30,000. We have a budget item for $400,000 for the fuel tanks, so this is well under our budget, as we were able to get the fuel farm pad as part of the Connect project funding as part of our match. So this is really just for you to approve us to apply for the grant, and then if we were successful, we would come back to you in the spring for approval and acceptance of the grant.
And
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Strike, is the core grant only allocation is available only for general aviation airports, or is it for commercial airports too?
As I understand it, general aviation only, if I remember.
Okay.
correctly. It's for mostly rural
Okay.
airports.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Ann.
Mhm.
If there are no more questions, could I please have a motion?
Commissioner Shepherd, I'd like to make a motion to authorize application for the COR grant for avgas tank at the airport.
Is there a second?
Meriwether, second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Strike
Aye.
aye.
Meriwether, aye.
Christie, I.
And Shepherd, aye. Motion passes. Thanks, Ann. All right, waterfront food concessionaire lease. Daryl.
All right, commissioners, our concessions are on a 5-year lease term, and they have all expired on October 1st of this year. So we've put together leases for the next 5 years. They've all been, both the food and the lesson and rentals have been looked over by Jerry, so we're good to go there. The notable changes would be that Big Winds does not plan to go forward with their space that they've had in the past at the event site. They will continue with their 2 spaces at the Hook. And we have a new kite school that would like to come in and take their place. And it's an existing kite school that's been operating out of Lyle for the past few years. And all applications were really good. All of our existing concessions have been amazing. So staff is recommending that we move forward and approve all of the existing concessions, and then add Oregon kiteboarding as a new concession. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Hey, Daryl, with the COVID, has the Sandbar and the Downwinder, have they experienced a lot more drive up business?
The Sandbar Cafe ended up not opening this year, and the Downwinder people were very busy. Well, one, due to that, and then it ended up being one of the busiest summers down at the event site that anyone can ever remember. So it was a really good year for them.
Okay.
Daryl, every time we're down there, which is quite frequently, my grandson loves Dippin' Dots. So somebody needs to provide those on the menu, no question.
Well, I will let Shada and Jonathan know, because they're all about that. That's great.
All right, can we get a motion? And you can include Dippin' Dots in that if you want. I'd support that. But get a
Well,
motion on-
first of all, Dave, what time are you down there, Dave?
God, anytime, I'm
I want to
retired.
know what time you're down there, so you buy me some Dippin' Dots.
I will be glad to buy you some Dippin' Dots.
Fair enough, road trip.
All right, let's
This
make it a
motion would be
motion.
for all the list, would it not, Daryl? Not just the 2 food service places. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, there is this is two separate ones. So the first one is to approve the food concessions and
Okay.
the new leases. And then the second one would be for the kite schools and to approve their leases.
Okay.
And Daryl, just before we make a motion, I'm fine with everything. Has there been any pushback from any of the other kite schools about not wanting to add another business, or I just don't want unintended consequences with adding a new school if there's a big pushback?
Right. Well, none of the existing schools want any more competition. I mean, that's pretty normal. No restaurant really wants a new restaurant. So there's I believe, a space to be filled, and there's a need. The last time that we did concession leases, it was 5 years ago. And just thinking back 5 years ago, how many people wanted kite lessons and how many people want them now. So yes, I've talked to each one of the kite schools, and each kite school would like it if they didn't have more competition so that they had more business. But honestly, Michael, John, and I thought about this long and hard and weighed everything out. And there's a need, and our mission statement is to promote business. And I think that the new person that wants to come in is really good, and he will uphold a high standard. And some of the other kite schools have not had as many instructors in the past. So you may get a little bit of pushback, but I feel strongly that we made a really fair decision, and that our recommendation is solid, and that I think the new person's going to be a good fit, and that there's enough business for all of them. When it's windy,
Yeah,
people are
it's windy.
yeah.
For
and when
what,
it's
for what it's
not-
worth, commissioners, the Oregon kiteboarding teaches my kids, so I've had experience with them. They're, from a parents and customer standpoint, they're quality. So I think.
Well, yes, and I've seen them operating out of Lyle. I guess my question is, I know that they operate out of Lyle. Is their plan to continue to operate out of Lyle and do the event site?
They told
No.
me this year that they were planning on moving to the event site primarily, which made me. They didn't say not Lyle, but they made me think that it's going to be all at the event site next year if they get, if this works out for them.
Okay, cool.
Yes, and that's what they had told me is Lyle is experiencing a hard time, of course, with the railroad and access. And so it's become more difficult, and that's why it's pushed more people to the event site, but that is their intent.
Great,
Daryl,
thank you.
Commissioner Strike, I'm sorry. Daryl, are you happy with the 5-year window?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Mhm.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to
Commissioner
authorize the
Shepherd.
2021-25 waterfront food concession leases with the Sandbar Cafe and Downwinder for spaces 1 and 2 at the event site cruise ship dock for the 2021 to 2025 term.
Dave, do you want to second that with a dippity dot or what?
I want to deputy dot that one. Yes.
Okay.
I think the term
So
is
it's
the
so
21.
amended, I see.
Excuse me, I think the term is the
Commissioner,
21
say-
to 26.
Oh,
Thanks,
excuse
Jeff.
me, 21 to 26. Thank you.
Yes, I'll second that.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Strike.
Fairweather, aye.
Chapman, I.
And Shepherd, aye. Motion passes. Unless there's anything else we want to comment on the second portion of this, I think we could just move along to a motion on that as well.
I mean, we
So moved by
authorize water.
Commissioner Strike.
Moved by Strike.
Second, Meriwether.
All in favor?
Chapman, I.
Strike, aye.
Fairweather, aye.
And Shepherd, aye. Motion passes as well. Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Good job, Daryl.
Commission call, Commissioner Meriwether,
No, none for me.
Commissioner Strike.
I do have a situation. I kind of bringing up the weather or warming shelter. We had a commission conversation with the last 2 meetings. Commissioner Everett and I had a strong conversation regarding that. I want to kind of get a feeling for, he felt that there wasn't a consensus on that topic. And I referenced that there was a majority of commissioners that wanted us to have staff do a certain act. And so I'd kind of like to have some clarity between the board. Is a majority consider a consensus? Because the majority will pass the bill to make a law. It's sure to me that it was a majority of commissioners that wanted staff to do an act for us. So Ben, I'd like to talk about that as far as how we can convey that to the chair. We want, if it is a majority considered a consensus, or, because I know when I was chair, if it was 3 commissioners, we're gonna, so I'd like to start there and maybe just pass it out, see what everybody's throw their 2 cents in.
My interpretation of our discussion was, I would define a consensus as all 5 of us on the same page, or at least agreeing to move forward in the same way. I saw that as a majority did not want to move forward, but it certainly was not 5 people saying the exact same thing. So I would not have called it a consensus. I would say that we had a majority.
Who was the
Ben,
who was the third person? That I know that Ben and myself were not for having those user groups together. I thought, I was under the impression that maybe David was also under that impression. I thought we did have a majority.
It was Commissioner Everett, Christie.
Commissioner Everett.
Oh, Everett.
And then Hobie and I were willing to continue with some level of discussion. I did not consider a consensus, but it was more of a 3.
Well, no,
We're not.
what
in
I was
favor of
talking about,
moving
guys,
forward,
is-
2 were okay with it. So yeah.
right. But my question was, I thought I had a consensus or a direction for staff to contact our renters to have them present at our Zoom meeting for we could have interaction with them and they could answer some of our questions if in fact we needed them to answer our questions to make a decision. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Not the warming shelter issue itself.
Okay. Yeah,
That's my question.
I gathered that was going to occur before the last meeting. It did not, but
right.
It's sort of a moot point, I felt like, as well. And I think I made the comment, there's no point in staff going out now and asking the other businesses what they think, because the majority of the commission didn't want to move forward based on the current circumstance. So
Hobie, I understand
Right.
what you're saying, that we did have a consensus to ask staff to contact the tenants to make sure the tenants were aware of the information. And I think that should have taken place. So I agree with that.
And Commissioner Everett said there wasn't a consensus. So what I'm saying, guys, is that we need to get some clarity, because I remember staff about 2 years ago came to us and asked us to have clarity in regard to directing them to do things. And now it appears that Commissioner Everett is self-interpreting this a little bit. And I don't believe that's his role. And so we need to get on the same page. Is 3 commissioners adequate to have staff do a function? That was my question to you guys tonight. So he knows that means we do it, or he can't assume or just change the direction we decided to.
well, no
Yeah.
individual commissioner can do that, regardless of whether they're chair or anything else. But I think it's safe to say, or it is fair to say, that was not definitively clear. At least that was not the message that staff heard from that conversation before. It didn't happen. If it's necessary, if there's some confusion, maybe we could do it 1 of 2 ways. We just vote on it. We just say, I move, we direct staff to talk to other, businesses in the area, and I second, and then we take a vote, and that's pretty clear. The other one is maybe if we said, is it clear where we're going at the end of a discussion that is general in nature, and maybe ask Michael, what did you hear and what did you think your direction was based on that, so that we have a clear understanding of how staff heard what we said.
And I think I understand the ending the same way Commissioner Chapman did, that we did discuss with staff having them speak to renters, tenants, neighbors. However, at the end of that discussion, it was noted that, well, 3 people here are not going to vote to move forward on this. So is staff's, at least in my understanding, staff's time best served by doing so, because three commissioners are not going to vote for this.
Right.
So
But
that's,
wasn't it
now,
after the
that does
fact,
not
Dan?
mean that,
I think you're going back to the meeting before, aren't you, Hobie?
Yeah.
Not the
Yeah, I
meeting,
am.
the
I'm going back
last
to the meeting
meeting, but
before,
the one
baby.
before.
Yeah, the
okay,
one
okay,
before.
excuse me. Then I understand
There was a
exactly,
fact
then I
finding.
understand it go the same way.
Because it was a fact finding. We wanted more information with those renters to answer that question. Do we want a warming shelter there?
It-
And somebody made a decision that it wasn't worthy, so they moved on.
Yeah, excuse me,
And I don't
Commissioner
want that to
Drake, I
happen.
thought you were
Yeah.
talking about last meeting. I understand 2 meetings ago,
No,
it's the
meeting
exact same
before.
way as you. Yep, I agree.
So what, so to tonight, so we get back, are we on the same page? Is the majority 3 to instruct staff to do something, or is it gonna take 5 or a motion or what? But I want some clarity here, because this is the first time I'm in this situation and I don't like it.
What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion, when I was chair, if you had 3 commissioners wanted painted blue, we're painting it blue. We're moving forward to get, it was a fact finding. It wasn't a motion. It was merely a fact finding, but I don't like to have one commissioner who has no authority to make a decision for, I thought, and I believe the ED in that meeting says, I understand. Okay, we'll do it.
I agree with Hobie.
Commissioner Merriweather?
Yeah, no individual commissioner can override the decision of the commission or yeah, but I don't know that happened. I don't know why the other businesses weren't questioned, or asked to provide input. I don't know if, frankly, did the chair go say, don't bother with that, Michael? I mean, I don't know.
In
And I
our
would like-
conversation, David, he said that he didn't want it and he's moving forward. Now, the
So we-
between Everett and I.
Commissioners, this evening, the 4 of us have a consensus on this matter. I agree with all 3 of you. I do think it would be wise to bring Commissioner Everett into this discussion at our next meeting, perhaps during Commissioner call very briefly, and include him in that. But we have a consensus this evening. I think we're on the same page. If 3 commissioners ask staff to do something, that's the direction we're moving.
I agree with that myself.
I would
All right.
suggest, as Commissioner Merriweather did, that when there's the end of a discussion, there needs to be brought back what the clear direction is. And I would encourage the commission to vote, to say, and if it's 3-2, that's a majority, you move ahead, but there's clarity, it's in the minutes, and it's definitive. So I would encourage the chair to call for a vote, so there's a clear direction set.
I would
Michael, can I
like
ask
to do
you a
that.
question? If you were to use the last scenario 2 meetings ago, I don't think there's no need for a motion. We just merely asked for fact finding. We asked your staff to do a certain act. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, Mike. It was just
Perhaps
merely
if the chair, once a request like that has been made, perhaps the chair should just make a point to summarize at the very end, okay, staff, looks like we have 3, 4, or consensus, it's irrelevant. This is what we expect on this point. And I mean, it takes 2 seconds, but perhaps we can just be more clear. Here's what we expect by the next meeting or whenever.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate
Yeah, I think
it.
that's a good way to do it. Let the chair summarize, here's what the direction is. Someone say they don't like it if they don't, but that's among the commissioners. And just let that go forward.
We're absolutely all on the same page here. I agree. And I'd like to bring Commissioner Everett into that at the next meeting, let him know what we discussed about, make sure he's okay with it, see if he has any thoughts, and then move forward. And I think the chair should be able to summarize those at the end of each discussion like that fairly briefly and easily for staff. Okay. Commissioner Chapman.
Oh, I'm good. I did the bridge meeting, and I think Kevin did a good job summarizing everything that we talked about and next steps, and everyone seems to be happy and on the same page. So all good.
I don't have anything to add. So with that, we can recess our regular session and move into executive session under ORS 192.6602E, real estate negotiations, and ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel on current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. I'd like to suggest a quick 5-minute recess, little break, and we can all get back together at 6:30, if that's all right with everyone here.